Welcome to Lock Picking Legend.
And yes, you are watching Lockpicking Legend, and I've got a real lockpicking legend on the show today. Marc Tobias. He's a member of ASIS, he's a member of ALOA, he's a member of SAVTA, IAIL, he's a member of the FBI InfoGuard, a member of AAPP and APA, and he's a technical advisor to the AFTE, and he's a member of the Underwriters Laboratory Standards Technical Panel on Locks and Safes. In association with UK Bump Keys and Lockpick World, I give you Marc Tobias. Okay, Marc, lovely to finally talk to you. We've nearly crossed paths a few times. I think we were going to meet in London, and you got back to me and said, I'm in London. I was like, great, I'm in Cambodia.
Yeah, that didn't work too well.
But you're finally here, and an amazing time to be here because you've got a new book coming out, one of many books you've written. Marc is a real lockpicking legend. My channel is called Lockpicking Legend, as you know, but Marc is a lockpicking legend. And this book's title will give you, well, I'll let Marc explain. It's called Tobias on Locks and Insecurity Engineering. Why have you written this book, Marc?
Well, because we've been working for the lock manufacturers around the world really for the past 25 years. And I've been longer than that for specific manufacturers. The problem is that their mechanical engineers know how to make locks work, but a lot of them don't know how to make them really secure. And they do not know all the techniques for bypass, and there's a lack of imagination, which goes with engineers. And so I finally decided to write a book about my experiences. And as you know, I lecture at Cambridge University every year or two on security and locks. And it was suggested by Ross Anderson, really, who wrote the book called Security Engineering on the cyber side, that it might be a good idea. There's a real problem with lock manufacturers worldwide as far as a lack of expertise in bypass techniques, both covert, forced, and hybrid, which is a mixture. And this is why locks can be opened, and this is why everybody likes your site.
Legendary.
And everybody's intrigued with locks because some of them are very high-tech puzzles that aren't supposed to be opened.
Okay.
That's the short answer.
But I mean, it's quite the book, though. What's it running? 600 pages?
It's more than 700.
Wow.
It took me 3 years to write it. I wrote it during COVID. As I tell everybody, it was my COVID sabbatical because I wasn't flying back and forth to Europe all the time. So my life wasn't disrupted. So I had time to sit home. And once I worked out an agreement with Wiley Publishers, which is a 250-year-old huge publishing outfit worldwide, it took me 6 months to work out the table of contents. It's a very complicated topic. Locks are very complex. My mom actually used to ask me, what's so difficult about sticking a key inside of a lock? And I used to laugh about it. I said, well, nothing's difficult about that, but making it secure and work properly is very difficult, as you know. And so once I laid out the contents of the book and the organization, I started writing, and I've got a library of hundreds of thousands of images. The book has got about 200 or so photographs and diagrams. So it's like my lock, safes, and security 25 years ago. Only it's not 1,400 pages. It's only 700 pages.
Only 700.
Only, and it's very, Chris, it's very detailed. And there's some repetition because it's a reference book. It's not a novel. But I tried to integrate a lot of case examples of what I call insecurity engineering. You know, when you design a lock and spend millions of dollars in R&D as a major manufacturer, and an 11-year-old girl can open it in 30 seconds, there's a problem. And that repeatedly happens. Some of our attacks have been very simple. You know, we run security labs, which is in connection with University of Pittsburgh School of Engineering. And, you know, some of our attacks are complicated, like Medico, that book you guys were selling for a long time. We still get orders for it 15 years later. It's amazing.
Mark's referring there to opening 30 seconds. Is that the one
Right.
wrote with Tobias?
Tobias Blues Manis.
That's right. So you took the Medico biaxial, which I think at the time was considered probably the most secure lock in the.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've read the book, and wow, it's in depth. You know, I think the words I would come away with would be rigor, thorough, in depth. But you know, I know the Medico biaxial, I know the lock, but you found, was it 7 or 8 methods of non-destructive entry?
Yeah, we figured, well, both forced and non-destructive. It took us 18 months from start to finish, and we never thought we could do it because Medico, since 1970, has been the premier high security cylinder in America and really all over the world. They're everywhere. And it was a revolutionary design. There's a chapter in the book about it, in the new book, how we did it. But I would encourage all your viewers, customers, if they're interested, they should read the book because it's a step-by-step process how we really deconstructed the security of the Medico lock from start to finish. And like I said, we never thought we could do it. And honestly, that's one of my rules in the new book. If you don't think you can open a lock, you probably won't be able to. There's a lot of attitude involved and persistence in doing what we do. And sometimes we can't, but Medico was a real target. And as you know, what prompted it, in 2006, they announced that their locks were bump proof. And that was a big red flag. And I called one of my colleagues at Medico and I said, you guys shouldn't be saying that because we're going to figure out how to do it, which we did. And ultimately, just to sum up, we figured out how to make 4 keys that we could pick or bump all of their non-master key locks in the world.
Intermission.
I just wanted to interrupt to make sure you got the gravitas of what Mark just said then. After their 18-month investigation into what was the most secure lock in America at the time, the Medico biaxial M3, Mark had 4 keys that would get them into every Medico biaxial M3 in the world, apart from master keyed systems, but that's understandable. It's absolutely outrageous. And back to the show.
No.
They thought we were nuts. And Wired magazine did a huge article about us in 2009. And everybody finally figured out, oh gosh, maybe these guys do know what they're talking about. and by the way, Medico is updated. The biaxial was the old one. Then they updated to the M3, which had a secondary slider, which we figured out how to bypass in about 30 seconds with a paper clip.
Legendary.
It really wasn't designed for security. It was for key control and to create virtual keyways. But it also impacts security, and the fact that we could open it, bypass it with a paperclip was not, it wasn't visibly very good.
Oh,
And now they've come out in 2022 with the M4, which is the latest version. It's very clever. I mean, seriously clever. They use side bit milling and they combine that mechanically with a sidebar. It's a very clever adaptation and it's a good lock. It corrected a lot of the problems that we found in the biaxial and M3. So, you know, I would highly, if anybody that's looking at putting in Medico cylinders, I think that's what they ought to put in now. I think that's what's available.
and what's that? The Medico M4.
It's the M4.
Okay.
And you know, is it perfect? No. I don't know of any lock that's perfect, but it's pretty good.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
That's good information. Always good to know. We went off a tangent a little bit there because of me,
Right.
but you were describing insecurity engineering.
Right.
Is that connected to the security via obscurity angle on lock manufacturing?
Well, not exactly. I mean, I created the term insecurity engineering for the industry when enough design engineers and risk managers and law enforcement read the book, they'll start using that term. Insecurity engineering is really what it is. When a lock manufacturer and a vulnerability assessment team design a lock, and it can be easily compromised, that's insecurity, and it was engineered that way. The problem is they don't pick it up. They don't see that because no lock manufacturer wants to produce a product that's not secure. And so I just decided it's a great term to identify what's going on. The real problem in the industry, Chris, one, they've had a lot of budget cutbacks. A lot of engineers have retired, and the kids that they're hiring out of engineering school basically don't know anything. You know, they're good engineers, but they don't know how to really apply it in the lock manufacturing venue. And more importantly, they're losing their institutional memory in the lock companies.
Wow.
And unless you know what went wrong previously, going back a couple hundred years, you can't really design a secure mechanism. And now we're compounding it by adding electronics. And I've addressed that in the book also.
And in the new book, Tobias on locks and insecurity engineering, I noticed that you go back to the competitive lockpicking in, I think, the turn of the end of the 19th.
In 1851.
That's it, the Great Exhibition.
Yeah, of course, with Alfred C. Hobbs. I should mention, there's going to be, I'm just sending the video uplinks today to Wiley. There's going to be about 100 videos that we've shot over the years of interviews, demonstrations that'll be on the Wiley website that goes with the book. So broken down by chapters so that the readers, video is always better than reading. And so the readers can go and look at videos to understand more what I'm talking about. But I was going to tell you, years ago, I interviewed the great-great-grandson of Brahma. I'm sure you're familiar with Brahma.
Yeah.
On 124 Piccadilly in London, where he had his lock shop, where he had the famous lock in the window that Alfred C. Hobbs, the American locksmith, came in and broke it in 21 days and won a big reward.
Yeah, can we just explain for people who don't know this? I think that was after because at the Great Exhibition in Crystal Palace, there's an essay actually on my website that was, you might know the fellow, I can't remember his name, but it's called Spectacles of Security. And he talked about how competitive lockpicking stole the show at the 1851 Great Exhibition. You know, there's all these things going on, but competitive lockpicking, and he put his, who is it? Brahma, is it? Who put his, he put it's that shop, I used to just live just down near that shop on Rupert Street in Soho. He put a lock in his window, and it was like, if you can essentially pick this lock, here's a reward. And Thingy Bob came over and done it.
Well, nobody had done it for 60, 70 years. It was the impregnable lock in England.
What was that
it's
lock
still
called? Can you remember offhand? I remember it from that article.
no, I think it's just called the Brahma. I don't know if it had a specific name.
And so you suggested earlier that those problems that were in lock manufacture then have carried on to the present day.
Well, they always will, because the problem is like 9/11 in America. Nobody could figure out that you could fly airplanes into buildings. It was a lack of imagination. We had a congressional inquiry and a report, as a matter of fact, and that's the problem. Everybody's guided by the standards, Underwriters Laboratory, Builders Hardware Manufacturer, VDS, British Standards Institute. Everybody thinks the standards are the end all, and they're not. They're really guidelines, and frankly, more for forced entry and endurance, and environmental impact than covert entry. And so a lot of lawyers have told me, well, we're not liable for anything because our locks meet the standards. So what? They're guidelines. The way we open a lot of locks are outside the standards. They're not addressed. And so they don't cover. And so that's the problem. And the other problem in standards, I've been a member of the UL technical team for locks and safes for 15 years. The standards are not updated very often, and there's no reward for the guys that test locks for certification if they can figure out how to break the lock or compromise lock. One of my colleagues hates the term break, so I keep using it. That's the problem. There's no reward. There's no incentive for the people that test these locks to certify them either at a factory, because there's a lot of self-certification, or for UL or BHMA, the labs. So they follow the guidelines within the standards. One of the criteria is a 5-year certified Aloha locksmith. I know a lot of locksmiths that are not good at picking locks. I've met 15-year-old kids that are much better.
Sure.
So what does that prove?
Hmm.
At the end of the day, especially for commercial and high security facilities, if they don't have the means to run their own tests, they rely on standard certifications. And one of the chapters in the new book is called My 3T 2R Rule, which really is an index of security for locks. And it sums up the 5 criteria to judge whether a lock is secure. It's time, tools, and training. How long does it take to open it? What kind of tools? What do you need to know? And then the repeatability and reliability of whatever you're doing. That's really what all the standards are about. And so I really spent a lot of time defining what that means, because it's really an index of how secure your locks or facilities are.
For people who missed it in the intro, Mark stands at the crossroads of locks and law. And I noticed the new book's got a lot of the legal angle as well around manufacture and other things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, you forgot there's one more crossroad. It's insanity.
Well, we all stand there in this game. And also, when Mark said he was a member of that organization, again, if you missed the introduction, if it matters and it's involved in locks, Mark is a member of it. So yeah, carry on.
Yeah, so basically liability law, I traced it all the way back to the Roman Empire.
Wow.
Because everybody needs to understand what you're liable for, what you're not liable for. Aftermarket, do you recall a lock? Do you notify your customers of a defect? But all the cases go back to England. There was I think it's Winterbottom. They're all laid out in the book. There was a case where a carriage crashed, a mail carriage, and the driver was injured because the wheel fell off. And at that time, the carriage company who had the contract with the postal service in England, they were held not liable because then there was called a concept of privity of contract. And the driver didn't have a contractual relationship with the mail carrier or the people that made the wagon. And so I traced how this evolved to current day. I didn't want to write a legal textbook,
Sure.
but engineers need to understand where this all started and what they can be liable for, not only in product liability, but also in misrepresentation, in fraud. And there's a very detailed chapter on intellectual property involving patents.
Yeah.
Because the lock industry is all about patents. And they need to understand what that means, what the criteria is for patents, and how they can defeat their own patents before they even file them.
So can you explain that? So how does that work? That sounds absurd, essentially. Or is
Well,
that
not exactly.
patent?
First of all, they changed the rules in America about 20 years ago. It used to be the rule was criteria was first to invent, got the patent, assuming it met the patentability criteria. Now it's first to file. So even if you were the inventor, the guy that files an application and first to file is probably going to get the patent.
Wow.
That's a real problem if you have design engineers talking to third parties, and those third parties go and file a patent application. And so I in the book, I cautioned everybody, here's how you can screw up your patent filing. Or if you publish something.
Yeah.
Because if it's in the public domain, you don't get a patent.
And people are proud of what they've invented, something new. As humans, we like to speak about these things, and
of course,
it sinks ships.
That's a big problem.
I remember in 2006, I started putting videos on YouTube bumping locks, and there was a new lock released. I'm not going to mention the company because, in fairness, I think nowadays they actually make some of the best locks in England, some of them. But they released this new lock, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. I'll see if I can bump it. And I ordered 3, and I used my UK Bump Keys email.
Right.
The fella rang me up. And he said, I will sell you these locks. He said, but can you not put anything on YouTube for about 6 months? Because we're waiting for certification and other things like that. It was a peculiar conversation to have. I kind of understood him, but I also didn't, because you touched on it a few minutes ago. That in England, I think that kite mark is something like the lock, a 3-star British kite mark is something like the lock will withstand 3 minutes of destructive and a destructive attempt or something. So I don't know why me bumping it would affect him getting that, but I can understand why he might have got the shivers a little bit and would have preferred me not to have put that video out.
Well, this was when I introduced lock bumping to America in 2006. I wrote a couple white papers, gave a lot of lectures, and was on television a lot all over the country.
So hang on, so this is interesting, because that was the day I just mentioned. That's when I started. I saw it exploding. So you lit the fuse of the bumping explosion in 2006.
I did in America. Barry Wells and Tool and a fellow in Germany.
Sorry, Mark. Again, for people who don't know, Tool it's spelled with 3 O's. It's the Open Organization of Lockpickers. Barry Wells. Is that Holland or Germany? I think it's Holland, is it?
Yeah, it was Knock was the locksmith in Germany. I think Klaus maybe. Tool is no longer in existence, I don't think, but everybody moved on. But they walked down the street with a television camera and opened about 25 businesses. Whack, whack, whack.
Yeah.
And that really got everybody going. But I perceived the problem in America. I met with a lot of manufacturers. They all laughed about it. They said, well, this isn't a problem. You can't do this, which is a typical answer. And so I did a lot of television, as I noted, and
it's the first thing you think about to secure your home and family, your lock. Much to my surprise, Marc Tobias, attorney and world-renowned security expert, showed me how very quickly my house could be broken into by a special master key.
This is a standard 5-pin lock. There you go.
Oh my gosh, you got into my house. This quick and easy lock-picking technique is used when opening a pin tumbler lock. A threat because 95% of us have those locks on our doors.
By bouncing the pins for an instant, you create a condition where the lock is really unlocked if you turn it.
I got every reporter or correspondent, either on network, to open locks on camera.
Yeah.
Which that really got everybody going. And so then all the manufacturers started scrambling. But in the interim, the best, lock manufacturer in America, Medico, which is the subject of our other book, they announced our locks are bump proof. And then they took that back and said, well, they're virtually bump proof. And I said, well, what the hell does that mean? It's, well, they're virtually resistant.
That's it.
And
get that in England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they filed a trademark for bump proof. And then they withdrew that trademark when we found it in the trademark office, which was the final nail in the coffin. And I'll tell you what, there's still a lot of locksmiths in America that don't believe that Medico locks can be bumped open. Are they easy to bump open? No, not unless you know what you're doing. Yeah. But Barry Wells had a competition with Tool somewhere in Europe, probably the Netherlands, and they had a lot of lock pickers opening locks in various times. My partner, who worked for the largest Medico lock shop in Miami, Tobias Bluesmanis, his best time is 23 seconds.
To bump the axial.
Oh, a high security at a government facility in Miami. And when he showed the supervisor that you could take any key for any office to set the sidebar properly and then pick the lock conventionally, they could not believe it. And it presents real security threats. But like I said, Medico has introduced their M4 last year. And we were somewhat involved in the design or development of that. And they did a really neat job. If you're familiar with side bit milling, which Bo Whedon in Sweden invented for Assa Abloy and for Schlage, they mixed side bit milling with their twisting pin or rotating pin. They did a really neat job mechanically. And so, like I said, they rectified a lot of the problems. They updated their code, so our 4 keys are not as reliable as they were. But it's really a good read, as you know. And the important thing is the methodology that we went through to figure out how to compromise the system.
Mark, have you noticed over the last, 20, 30 years, you say that Medico involved you in the M4, the newer version.
Right.
Have manufacturers, have you noticed a change in manufacturers willing to work with people like you over the last 20, 30 years? Or has it just been a question that the internet come along, the information's out there, so they need to, or maybe a bit of both of that?
Well, first of all, I'd question, what does quote people like you mean?
You know what I mean.
They're more willing. They figured out because of hacking on the cyber side that there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of talent. Unfortunately, most of the lock manufacturers think that the premise only invented here applies. They think they're the only ones that know all about their mechanical designs. And as it turned out for Medico, they didn't. There was an embedded design defect that was there for 25 years that, when they finally figured it out, it cost them a lot of bad press, publicity, and sales. But the lock manufacturers have figured out, first of all, when we started lecturing at DEF CON, which is the hacking group get together in Las Vegas every August, they went after me at our Locksmith Association, ALOA, for unethical conduct because they thought it was terrible that we were talking about opening locks.
Hang on. When you say they went after you, you mean what, legally or just?
Yeah, they filed an ethics complaint.
Wow.
And because the locksmiths thought this is absolutely outrageous, this is all secret, and it's unethical to be talking about any of this. Well, they filed their complaint, and as a lawyer, I told them, you go ahead and file it. I'm going to go ahead and file a lawsuit against you guys for disparagement and some other torts. So they backed off, and now a lot of locksmiths go to DEF CON because they figured out there's a lot of great information there. The most popular venue at DEF CON is the Lockpicking Village. And that's where we met, Fiddler and Toby and I met little Jenna Lynn. She was 10 or 11 years old. We made a star out of her because she figured out how to bump open locks because she didn't have the strength in her hand to really whack them with the bump hammer. And, we shot video and we showed it during our lecture that year at DEF CON. And that really set the news media going. I mean, every major television network and magazine covered it.
I remember.
And,
I remember it all happening.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think they call it bad optics. I think the youth call it bad optics.
Bad optics would be an understatement. It was, well, you don't remember the NBC Today show, which was the premier morning program with Matt Lauer. NBC, which is probably the largest network in America, they took me to two very upscale multi-million-dollar houses in New Jersey and had me walk up to the door and open them in 5 seconds. And the owners were standing there, and the owners were saying, well, our locksmith told us that the deadbolts are secure. And as I noted, and you can Google that video on our YouTube channel or our website. I said, yeah, the deadbolts are secure, but the locks that control the deadbolts may not be. And that's the problem. And it always has been the problem. And, I learned bumping in Copenhagen, Denmark, from the master locksmith there that has had a big shop. He's retired now, and he was president of Aloha, Hans Malsheda. He was the genius of Copenhagen, and he taught me lock bumping. And you know that there was the original patent for lock bumping was issued in England in 1925.
That's right.
Yeah, we can blame you guys for it. Everybody forgot about lock bumping. I mean, the vulnerability has been in pin tumbler locks since Yale invented them. It was not in the Egyptian pin tumbler lock 4,000 years ago, but it certainly was when Yale in 1860 figured out how to make them smaller and 2 pins per chamber. And so that vulnerability has always existed. And we can thank another Englishman, my friend Sir Isaac Newton, 350, 400 years ago, for developing his 3 laws of motion in physics. And that's why locks can be bumped open.
Yeah, Newton's cradle.
And so England's really responsible for this whole problem.
I'm quite proud of that. I must admit.
Yeah,
Was it
yeah.
you that exposed the Caba Simplex affair? Was that your
That wasn't
article?
exactly me. I wrote about it in Forbes and it was in the New York Times. But I'm not sure who. I don't know if I was the first in the media
Okay.
to expose it. I know it was picked up a lot. That was in 2010. There was a lawsuit that was filed in 2010 against Caba. I was actually on a ship in the middle of the ocean on my way to or from England, and one of our clients called me urgently and said, "What is this deal?" And so we had a conference call, and I said, "Well, the engineers at Caba, it was actually ILCO at that time, um, they forgot about Mr. Magnetism. And that was the problem. They put a ferrous critical component in their push button locks, which there's millions of them. Even today, even at our university, we have them all over the university. So there's this ferrous component, and if you took a strong magnet and put it next to the component on the outside of the lock, it's open. You just do the lever, it's open.
Yeah, so for people who don't know this, it's quite I think that what, $330 lock or something, push button.
I don't know how, yeah, probably about
Quite an
that.
expensive lock. You'd expect to get some sense of security as a normal consumer, but get a rare earth magnet, put it on the right place. As Mark said, there's a ferrous component in it. It's magnetized. You'll pull it out of the way and it opens. But wasn't the lawsuit because they said they found a fix for it? I mean, I don't want to implicate myself.
Well, first of all, they didn't tell anybody for quite a while.
So they knew and just carried on selling them.
I'll tell you what, one of my colleagues that we do a course and a disc set with 130 videos called DAME, Defense Against Methods of Entry. And we now have that online, lss-dame.com. This is how to open a lot of different locks and safes and whatever. Harry Shearer is the one that developed that program. And he's a LOA expert and has done a lot with the feds. He's former military and very, very, very bright in the industry. They knew about it 6 years before it went public.
Well,
because
I'm sorry, just to confirm, before the vulnerability went public or the lock?
No, before, well, the lock was developed in 1965.
Wow.
That long, way before there were rare earth magnets, to be fair.
Yeah.
And about 1980, rare earth magnets were developed. But you don't have to have a rare earth magnet to do what we did. But the engineers never considered the issue. And the problem, as I pointed out in the book, just because the original patent was issued in 1965, in 2022, if you have the same problem, they're still liable because you're gauged by the current state of the law and security.
Wow.
And so about 6 years, the government figured out the vulnerability a long time before it went public. Well, they didn't want anybody to know about it because they needed to be able to get into locks. These locks are everywhere. Pharmacies, banks, government facilities, airports. And so they wanted access covertly. So they didn't tell anybody. So, finally, Caba, which is the parent company to ILCO, they finally had to come out and they admitted and they put a fix in for free that they could upgrade, anybody could upgrade their locks and change the
out of
ferrous component.
Multi-millions of installed Caba Simplex, they offered a free upgrade.
Yeah, somebody had to install, but it's an easy fix. And frankly, their original fix we didn't like. We were actually asked to become part of the class action lawsuit against Caba, and we refused and ultimately, just a minute. Ultimately, we ended up going to work for them. And because they realized that they had an insecurity engineering problem,
There you
and
go.
actually the former CTO of Caba for 23 years, who we used to report to, he wrote the foreword for the new book.
And in fairness, that I think is the best outcome. They made mistakes. We all make mistakes, but they went to the
Yeah.
people who knew. And they said, "Let's get this sorted out." And
Well, listen, they had to.
okay, that's ruthless. Oh, that's just great. The keen-eyed among you will notice that Zoom decided to freeze at this part of the presentation. And I don't want to put words into Mark's mouth, but I will summarise what I got from it. Essentially, Caba had to go to the likes of Mark, had to go to security experts, people who knew about insecurity engineering, just to show that they're doing the right thing regarding the lock that they sold for years and years and years, knowing it had a very simple vulnerability. So I'll put a little transition in now, and we're on the home stretch. So if you have got this far, give us a like, and if you're not subscribed, that would be nice. Check out some of our shorts as well. They're incredible.
Legendary.
Tobias on locks and insecurity engineering. Who's this book for, and what are they going to get out of it?
It's primarily for design engineers, for crime labs, risk managers, law enforcement, locksmiths. Really, if you look at the book in a little different way, it's a manual on how to reverse engineer locks to identify potential vulnerabilities. It's a good read as far as, what can go wrong, but for any covert entry teams, for anybody that wants to analyze or figure out what can go wrong with locks that they're looking at, hopefully it's all in the book. I tried to make it as comprehensive as possible, but that's really the primary audience.
Okay, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. On the off chance you get out to Cambodia, where
who goes to Cambodia? I just want to know how the food is.
the food is, people think it's going to be like Thai food, but because of the war here, the Khmer Rouge and all that,
Right.
they haven't. You go to Thailand and people think if it's got pineapple and coconut in it, it's Thai food, which isn't Thai food. Thai food's almost unbearable because it's so much chili. If you go to Isan, which is on the Lao border, sort of, well, Golden Triangle is the best geographical way of telling you where it is. I mean, I went up there and here's your food, and okay, I'll try it. Yeah, and egg soup, and it's even the locals find it hot, and so for someone like me who's got I don't really want to go into describing my tongue, but you know what I mean. It's a soft palate compared with
right.
But Cambodian food is still very much Cambodian, but there's plenty of places to eat westernized food out here.
Well, I was in Thailand a couple months ago, and but it was a wedding, so they had all these exotic foods, and I actually just had Thai food for dinner last night at a restaurant, and it was fine, but I have no idea. I've never been to Cambodia. This was the first time I was in Thailand, and I'd had enough of their traffic in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for me, there's a 24-hour supermarket 5 minutes on my scooter. And so because of the time difference with most of my staff, I tend to work late, and I'm a writer as well. So I work late into the night, so I can get onto my scooter. At 3 o'clock in the morning, there's no traffic. It's a lovely empty road drive to the supermarket. I do that twice a week. But yeah, if you're on a scooter, it's actually all right. It's if you're in a car and you've got
It's impossible.
Yeah. And
Yeah, no, it's impossible. The traffic where we were at in Thailand, I think it's just worse than New York,
and that's saying something. Where in Thailand were you?
the capital.
Okay, up in Bangkok. Yeah, it's
Yeah, in Bangkok.
carnage up there for sure.
Well, the problem is, Delhi, which I go to in India, the traffic is insane, but it's chaotic. It's not orderly, and everybody knows how to drive. In Bangkok, it's you can't move. It's just it's gridlock.
Yeah.
And we were lucky to be able to walk from our hotel to where we wanted to go, but it took an hour to get from the airport to our hotel.
Intermission.
Well, it was at this point I decided you didn't really need to hear me and Mark talking about our travels around the world. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've got something from it. There's a link to Mark's new book and Mark's older book, The Open in 30 Seconds, in the description of this video. Go and check them out. We've got them in Lockpick World and UK Bump Keys. And I'd like to thank Mark again for coming on and having a very interesting chat. Mark, congratulations on the book. Hopefully we'll meet in the flesh one day. Look after yourself, and thanks for doing this interview. It's been a real pleasure.
Hey, buddy, thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, take care, Mark.
Okay, buddy, thanks a lot.
No.